kids.
This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Hi, and welcome to Learning to Dad. My name is Tyler Ross, and I am pumped to be here with Joel Garreau today, one of my favorite people to talk to. Thank you for having the conversation with me.
Right, exactly. That's nothing wrong with this conversation. The little tequila won't cure.
That's right. And seeing as, what do you think, it's 90 degrees outside, this
Yeah.
might go to our head quickly.
Exactly.
So this could be a fun, but we are on location, too. I'm usually at my office, so
Right.
let's start out just today with tell me about where we are.
This is Pilgrim's Rest in Broad Run, Virginia, Fauquier County. It's an 88-acre forest, and I am its troll.
Well, you've taken good care of it. I love coming here. The house is amazing.
Yeah, the back end of it has been around for a long time, and the front end is the addition. When I suddenly realized we just didn't have enough house for two growing girls. And I said to after I fired the first three architects,
Yeah.
I went to Henry Rust and I said, Henry, what we need here is the old part of the house burned down in 1862 when the Yankees came through the second time. That's what I told him. That's what I told him. And we're going to build it back.
Yeah.
It was a complete fiction.
Nothing new. It wasn't here in 1862 you
Yeah.
made up.
Right, I made up the whole
Yankees
thing.
coming through.
Made up the whole. No, the Yankees coming through was true.
Yeah. Have you done-
But everything else was
Has there been any metal people call you and ask about
Oh yeah,
detect and stuff
oh yeah,
here?
plenty of that.
Yeah.
And so this is anyway. So we tried to make this place look like it grew here,
Yeah.
and
It feels that way.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I like, yeah.
It's better than being under a bridge.
That's right. Beats the hell out of that. Air conditioning works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I'd like to kind of, for those listening, kind of introduce who you are. And, it's about, the show's about entrepreneurs, professionals. And so some background, I could go on and on. Books, writing, talks, all these things. But how would you describe your own professional self?
Well, I've done a lot of things, but what they all have in common is that I explore culture and values, who we are, how we got that way, where we're headed, and what makes us tick. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I draw maps for those who follow, and those maps turned out to be things like books.
Yeah.
And so I've written 3 of those. And anyway, and so in my previous life, I was a reporter and editor at the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. And now I work year-round for Arizona State University, and I'm there in Arizona from January to May and in Virginia for the rest of the year, avoiding East Coast winters and Arizona summers. Yeah. Because Abraham Lincoln was wrong. You can fool all the people all the time.
I'd like to get on that program.
What a scam.
Is there what subject could I possibly teach in Arizona for that schedule?
Podcasts.
There you go. Yeah, but I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, that's right. Why should you be different, right? Make it up as you go along.
So it's such an interesting time. I mean, is it fair to call you a futurist?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I'm used to answering to that. My pals and I are a little allergic to that word because I don't do predictions. Predictions are always wrong. I'm still waiting for my hotel on Mars, and right in my flying car and all that. Anyway, but so what I do is scenario planning, which is a systematic, rational, logical way of thinking about the future. Rather than trying to guess the future, what you do is you come up with as many uncertainties about the future as you possibly can, and you see if there's patterns, and there always are. And then you look for strategies that are robust, no matter which of these futures that you can concoct might happen. But anyway, so people nonetheless always say futurist, and I've learned to say, okay, all right,
Is there a more appropriate kind of word or?
Oh, I don't know. Scenario planner is the official word, but don't.
It's a lot of
don't
syllables.
don't let it get to you.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite kind of set of scenarios that you've kind of conjured or created or built or, over the course of your doing this?
Well, we did a set once for the family here in 1999.
Yeah.
Remember Y2K?
Mm-hmm.
Remember, there was this very serious concern that when the calendar rolled over, that all the computers in the world were going to die. It was a serious worry.
Yeah.
And nobody could, and it was impossible to test this in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, if I would really lose all cred as a futurist if the whole thing, went south and my family and I were stuck here scratching our butts trying to figure out what the hell we were doing. So anyway, I thought about this, and I thought, what are the uncertainties if the computers all die? And what are the critical uncertainties? And there were two, basically. One is the gear going to work, yes or no? Mm-hmm. And imagine that as a horizontal axis with, everything works at one end and nothing works at the other end with all the possibilities in between.
Yep.
And the vertical critical uncertainty was, is the society going to hold together? Yes, no, with all the possibilities in between. And if you cross those two axes, you get four different stories about the future. Mm-hmm. In the upper right, you get the gear works and the society works. Yeah. And that's what happened. That's what actually happened.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that going in. So in the lower left, you had the hell scenario in which the gear doesn't work and the society rips itself apart. Mm-hmm. And then there was the other two, which is, gear works, society falls apart. Gear doesn't work, society comes together. And so my question essentially for that was, should I get a generator? Yeah. And so when I did the scenarios, I realized, that's only going to work in one scenario, in which in which there's going to be gasoline soon, back soon. And should I buy more guns and more ammunition? Well, no, actually, the robust scenario is to have a lot of your friends in the same boat with you, so you can be collective. Now, the problem was that we live in the country and our neighbors are pretty far apart, and we didn't really know each other very well. So we decided the robust scenario was to get to know the neighbors mm-hmm. in advance of this, so that if the crap hit the fan, we could come together rapidly. So there was a house down at the bottom of the road owned by an old woman who, she'd rented it to a bunch of, there's no other word for this, white trash. And
sure.
And they trashed the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she's old, and she couldn't figure out what to do about it. And so it was an eyesore. Mm-hmm. So Adrian decided to bring the neighborhood together to say, let's spend a Saturday cleaning the place up for the old woman. And but her real agenda that she didn't tell them, her real agenda was for the neighbors to get to know each other and to know more about each other, just in case
Very clever.
We had to come together on January 1st in one big damn hurry. And it worked. Everything went well, but it was robust even in the scenario where everything went well, because to this day the neighborhood is much more together mm-hmm. than it ever was before, and we plow each other's driveways, and I discover that there's a whole bunch of people in the country with amazing capabilities, like portable welding and stuff like that. You never know when that's going to come in handy.
Yeah, sure. It's a Y2K type scenario, 9/11 potentially.
Yeah, anything.
Anything. It feels delicate.
Yeah, exactly. If the world ever begins to get uncertain, we're ready.
Yeah, I could sell your house in the apocalypse if need be.
There you go.
I bring skills.
There you go. That's right.
Well, you've tackled topics, and forgive me if I'm summarizing this poorly, but I'm thinking about Edge City, your book, as well, which is so funny because several people I know have had that as a textbook in their college courses. And then Radical...
Make me feel old.
Oh, these are my grandparents' friends.
Yeah, right.
But the way I assess it right now in my head is that one is kind of biological, genetic, and the other is kind of like on an individual basis maybe, and the other is kind of more societal, or is that?
Well, these three books are all appear to be very different. Everybody wonders, well, where did that come from?
Yeah.
One is called The 9 Nations of North America, which is about how North America works as if it were 9 separate civilizations. The second is Edge City, Life on the New Frontier, which is about the biggest revolution in 150 years and how the world builds cities that are way past the old downtowns and now much larger than them. And the third is called Radical Evolution, The Promise and Peril of Enhancing Our Minds, Our Bodies, and What It Means to Be Human, which is about the future of human nature. But what they all have in common is culture and values. I mean, so Radical Evolution is only marginally about technology. It's really about who we are, how we got that way, and where we're headed, and what makes us tick. And that's what all the books are about.
Yeah, is it a kind of guns, germs, and steel, except in a different approach? Is that
only looking forward 2 generations
as opposed to backwards?
Right.
Wonderful. I read it so many years ago that I didn't understand it then. So imagine how I feel now. And then you were working.
Were you in high school at the time?
Yes.
Were you
No, I'd just gotten into college. It was in 2005, right?
Yeah.
So I was in college. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things about my daughters is I had Evangeline, my younger daughter, who was at home at the time when I was writing this. I had her read these chapters as I was writing them because I wanted to hit the audience that what I call the 3 I's for intelligent, interested, and ignorant of the subject at hand. Okay. And it pays to have, when you do that, to have a specific person in mind that you're writing to. And so I wanted it to be read by like a smart high school senior. I didn't want it to be over their heads. And stuff
that explains why I didn't fully grasp
it. So it took you to senior year of college. Okay, well, you're a slow learner. So I got invited to Highland one time, to our local high school, and a bunch of kids had read it, and I thought, I'll be damned, it worked.
Yeah.
Every helped shape that book, and it worked.
That is awesome. That is really, really amazing. And we'll get into your kids too. Both of whom I can't speak more highly of. They're both so smart. And Ryan says that Simone is one of her favorite people on the planet, if not her favorite person on the planet.
Wait till we start talking about Nigeria.
Oh yeah. I can't wait to hear some of these stories. Yeah. But I want to be patient, and I want the people listening to be patient because they will be worth it. But I want to talk about your professional arc. Like, where did you go to college? What happened then? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is the first town in North America with a factory in 1793.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the first town in North America with a polluted river next to the factory in 1794.
Yeah.
It's an old-time New England gritty city. And anyway, except for the Boston Reds, the Pawtucket Red Sox.
Yeah.
AAA ball team.
Yeah.
That's its major claim to fame. But anyway, I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could, and so I went to one of the big mistakes of my life. I ended up going to the University of Notre Dame, and from which I never got a degree. So here I am now, a college professor at ASU, and I don't have a degree in anything.
Yeah.
Not even a BA.
Yeah.
So like I said, Abraham Lincoln was wrong. You can't fool all the people all the time. And I got out of there and ended up looking for something to do. And a friend of mine got hired by the Washington Post. And he called me up and he said, "Your parents were in the furniture business, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That means you know how to drive a truck, right?" And I said, "Yeah."
That was the one thing that makes you qualified to drive a truck, is if your parents were in the furniture business.
That's right. Since the age of 16, that's how you became valuable, was being able to drive a truck.
Yeah.
So he says, look, I got to show up at the Washington Post on Monday, and I got my wife and my daughter and my household of furniture. Can you we'll get a truck, and can you move them for me? I'll pay for it. I said, okay, sure. I had nothing better to do. I was looking for a job. And so we loaded up the truck, and it was like the Jodes, and we made it from South Bend to Washington. And we unloaded the truck in 104-degree heat in August in Washington. God help me.
Yeah.
And anyway, and so he said, you want to go look at the Washington Post? So I said, sure. And he said, as long as you're here, you want to find out if they have any jobs? I said, sure.
Yeah.
So I walked in, and this was just at the beginning of the Ben Bradley era. Ben was he was just the new editor, and he was the guy who made the Washington Post what it is today, with the Pentagon Papers and Watergate and the whole deal.
Okay.
And it was just ramping it up. And so they were hiring enough people with the right number of arms and legs, basically. And so I walked in the door, and they said, okay. And I missed one step, which is that I had, at the time, I had hair down to here, and hair and a beard down to there. And they looked at me, and they said, okay, which would you rather be, the rock and roll critic or a night copy editor? And I said, actually, I like being an editor. And so they said, okay, you're hired. So anyway, that was in 1970.
What's an editor do?
You know all the mistakes that you don't see in the newspaper?
Yeah.
That's what an editor
That's
does.
what you did. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about the ones I do see? That's what an editor did.
That's the reporter's fault.
and no doubt your friends listening to this are going, fucking Joel.
Right. But anyway, so we ended up here, and Adrienne, my wife, and I were both city folk. I grew up in Pawtucket, and she grew up in Paris. She and her siblings all grew up in Paris. Their parents were American journalists who living abroad. So for some reason or other, we decided that what we needed to do is live on a farm in the country. Yeah. And so we ended up doing that when in New Jersey, where the Post had just bought a newspaper, the Trenton Times. And then when that wound up, we started looking around for a place when we were coming back to Washington. And and we put an ad in the paper that said, young couple looking for, small farm within an hour of D.C. And we got like 80 responses.
Wow.
Yeah. And we narrowed it down to about 12. And Adrienne went down to look, and the first place she looked at was in a county that we couldn't even pronounce the name, Fauquier.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she found a place on 10 acres with a log cabin built in 1790. And she called and she said, I found it.
Yeah.
I said, come on, that's the first place you looked at. Well, no, it turns out she was right. That was it. And so that's how we moved to Fauquier County in 1976, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
And then when Simone, my oldest daughter, was born, that old log cabin was too cramped to raise children, so we moved over the ridge to this place, Pilgrim's Rest, and we ended up building, and it was another old beat-up place, and tough to tell. My friend Marty, the asphalt king of the East at the time, said, this place would look best on the bucket of a D9 cat, which is a bulldozer. And it was years before I realized, he wasn't entirely wrong. It's tough to tell the difference between old and charming sometimes. And anyways, but by then we had replaced everything in sight and added on. And so we've been living in Fauquier ever since.
So here comes Adrienne up the driveway now. So you met Adrienne in New Jersey or?
No, I met her at the Washington Post when I started there in 1970. And she decided she liked the cut of my jib, so she invited me to her place to in Georgetown, that this apartment that looked like it had been put together by a smart Montessori class.
Yeah.
And the sensible thing, she heard me say that I had to sell my motorcycle to leave South Bend.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, my ex-boyfriend is selling his bike. Do you want to see it? So I said, okay. So I went to Georgetown and took one look at it, and it was not at all what I wanted. But one thing led to another, and then she made me lunch, and she said, you want lunch? And I'm hungry. And I said, sure. And so she went to the refrigerator and opened it up, and the only thing in it was a black lump and a couple of eggs. And she opened up the freezer, and there was a crusty gray clump of ice. And she said, oh, lunch. Okay. But anyway, she grew up in France. So she took the black lump, and that turned out to be a perfectly ripe avocado.
Yeah.
She took the block of gray ice, and that turned out to be shrimp. And she took the eggs, and she made mayonnaise from scratch with a French whisk. And I'd never seen anything like this before in my life. I thought mayonnaise required an industrial process the size of New Jersey, But anyway, so she made the mayonnaise, made the shrimp, put it in the avocado, and she said lunch. And I was in love. I said, this is why I came to Washington.
It's the perfect embodiment of what they say. The way to a man's heart is through his belly.
It was, absolutely, yeah. And so that's the story we tell the children. And there's a part, and it's true, but it's not the end of the whole thing. And we've spared them for what happened that afternoon.
Well, I'm going to assume that they'll take the time to listen to this, so I won't pry any further,
exactly.
And I'll let the imagination of the audience take hold. So you're at Washington Post, you meet Adrian, you guys get together, stay together. Did you get married pretty quickly, or?
No, that didn't happen until 1976, but we lived together practically from the beginning.
And how long did you stay at the Washington Post?
39 years.
And you went from night editor. What was the evolution of that?
Long story, but basically I worked for every section of the paper except sports in the course of this. And what everything had in common was I was trying to figure out what made humans tick. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up in National, Metro, Outlook, all kinds of places like that. And anyway, and it was the metropolitan area was. And then at one point, this is how we got to Fauquier. At one point, I realized that Richard Nixon had changed my life.
Yeah,
I have to give Guy credit. I have no choice. Remember Spiro Agnew, his vice president? No, too young. Yeah. Of course you don't. I know the name. Yeah, you know the name from history.
To me, it's history. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Spiro was this loudmouth who he said things like, "The press is nattering nabobs of negativism."
Wow.
Good line.
Yeah.
And anyway, and he said that we're in an echo chamber talking only to each other. And I said, that is completely wrong. And then I thought about it for a minute, and I thought about the last party I was at, and I thought, you know what? He's right. Yeah. So that's when we started looking around for a place as far outside of Washington as we could get that I could still hold down a job.
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up in Fauquier, basically. Well, and so anyway, because at the time, and to that matter, it's still pretty much true, Fauquier County Virginia had essentially no organized Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, and to this day, that's not far from the truth.
Yeah. They come up with rural Democrats. There are a couple of those.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, and so it was a graduate education in Americans. And
well, so 39 years. Would you say that more has changed in the last 10 than did in the 39 that you put in at Washington Post?
Oh yeah, that's pretty safe.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I didn't leave it left me. In 2009, the bottom fell out of the business model for salaried journalism, basically. I mean, there's no business model.
Yeah.
And, and as somebody who was interested in the future, I'd pretty much seen this coming, but I was hoping it wouldn't happen so fast. And so anyway, in 2009, I took the last buyout of senior staff before the layoff started. And anyway, and so that's when I started looking around for something else to do. And that's when I was recruited by Arizona State University, which is run by this guy named Michael Crow, who's this visionary. And ASU has now been ranked by U.S. News and World Report for years in a row as the #1 most innovative university in America.
Wow.
It's also the largest,
Yeah.
with something like 100,000 students last I counted. And anyway, and he basically looked at my strange resume and he said, "You make something happen and I'll figure out how to pay for it."
Yeah.
Which is a handsome offer, but the trouble is you have to keep on making something happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing there for 10 years.
So what do you teach, a series of classes or a class or a subject?
Well, it's a problem because a big part of this is that they want me to be in both locations.
Okay.
And one of the things, both in the D.C. area and in Arizona. And so what I've learned is that wherever I am at any given point in time, they want me on the other side.
Of course. Of course.
Okay. So I spend a lot of time in, seat 12D.
Yeah.
And,
Aisle or window?
Yeah, window. If I ever get tired of looking out the window, I'm going to stop flying.
Yeah.
I love looking out the window. And so anyway, but that means that it's tough for me to hold down my own teaching schedule. So I teach everybody else's classes.
Okay.
Which is great because I've ended up teaching across the broad horizontal diversity of the university. I teach, in theology courses, in biology courses, in English, in engineering, and all that. And the stuff that I usually do for them is the radical evolution stuff, which is about the future of the species, in which we've come to a turning point in history, in which for the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, our evolution is not really just puttering along. It's something that we've taken into our own control with the genetic, robotic, information, and nanotechnologies. So we are in the astonishing position of being the first species in history to decide who we're going to be. And in that situation, the question becomes not what we can do, which is just about anything, but what we should do. Mm-hmm. And that cuts across all kinds of different university areas.
God, I want to have a 5-hour block to just have that conversation with you. And I wouldn't expect it to be a conversation. I'd expect it to just me nod my head and drool into my lap. So I can only imagine that topic was kind of the end of the funnel from the Washington Post experience. But over those 39 years, did you have a particularly favorite topic or subject or series that you wrote about and covered that was most stimulating?
Well, if I had a nickel for every Pall Mall that Carl Bernstein bummed off me back in the day. Yeah, I'd have a much nicer house.
Just more land. I think you keep this exactly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
The truck.
Right.
And the
I have acreage envy.
Yeah.
I don't want all the land in the world. I just want all the land adjacent to mine.
Yeah. Until we get to the oceans, I suppose.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But anyway, Carl was, one of Woodward and Bernstein, the Watergate guys, and that's my original plan was to go to work for the Post for 2 years and save up all the money I could, and then split to travel around the world. Mm-hmm. And so I did half of that. By 72, I had saved a bunch of money, but that's when Watergate started. Carl and Bob got this, this third-rate burglary, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And I decided, I want to stick around and see how this movie ends.
Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up being there for the Watergate thing. And I wasn't directly involved, but everybody I knew was. And so
had to be electric in the offices all the time, and just what's new, what do you know type of stuff.
And the nice thing about being a journalist during the Watergate era in Washington was even the copy editors could get lucky in Georgetown on Saturday night.
You just flash the badge.
Yeah,
and
that's
you're
right.
That's great. So you at that time you were living in D.C. or D.C.
Yeah.
area, and then
I lived in cities all my life, so that's why when we
okay, the draw to come out here.
yeah.
I sure love it out here.
Yeah,
God, it's
pretty
great.
great.
And it's starting
God's
to cool
country.
off a little bit.
It usually does.
Yeah, it does eventually. So I'm going to say in the mid 80s, you're in full stride at the Post. You've been there for a while, and you start having kids. So
Right.
Kid number one comes along. Like, were you ready for it? Expectations? Like, how did it impact your professional?
Nobody ever is.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So first of all, if that's a nice segue to dadding,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, well, so first of all, I want to make it clear, I don't have any advice for anybody about being a dad.
Yeah.
I'm still making it up, and
Yeah.
have been for 34 years.
I think the best we can do is watch each other make it up and then share it and
Yeah.
say, I like the way that guy made it up, or I don't
Right.
like the way he made it up. So
Right.
that's kind of what we're
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And second of all, I want to make it abundantly clear that Adrian, my wife, did most of the heavy lifting, almost all the heavy lifting. So, having said that, I do have some stories. You want to hear some stories?
I would love to hear stories.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to use a vulgar word here.
It's dick, vagina, pussy, fuck.
Not that bad.
Okay.
Well,
You
one of
had-
them, yeah.
I've given you permission.
Anyway, so I need to explain. All right, let me tell you about Marseille in France.
Yes.
Marseille is a place, well, I don't speak French, first of all. I mean, I really don't. I have some words, but no sentences. Mm-hmm. In Paris these days, you don't need much more. So they're so used to tourists, right? And I'm usually there with Adrian's family, who grew up there, kids of American journalists.
Yeah.
Now, by contrast, Marseille, down on the Mediterranean, by French standards, is pretty hardcore.
Okay.
In Marseille, my hotel keeper spoke less English than I do French.
Yeah.
That's pretty hardcore. Marseille is so hardcore, in fact, that my brother-in-law, Chris Cook, shared a Pulitzer in the 70s for a Newsday series. It's called The Heroin Trail.
Wow.
And the reason he was involved in it is because he could speak French like a Marseille thug. That's
Wow. That's a dialect.
Yeah, so that's, So today, heroin's not such a big deal, but Marseille is now the gateway to Arabia and to Africa. So it's plenty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2006, Simone, my eldest daughter, your pal, got around to thinking about junior semester abroad. A lot of her pals were going to Aix-en-Provence. That's an artsy place in the south of France. It's a cultural island, for globalists. And Simone thought about Aix because it wasn't Paris, which she knew.
Yeah.
Instead, she picked Marseille. Why? I said. And I'll never forget her response. She said, X is for pussies.
That speaks volumes.
I know, really. I've always admired that line. That's one of those lines you never have to write down. You're not going to forget it.
Well, I want to qualify this for a moment because I remember Simone's senior high school quote, "She who dies with the best stories wins."
Oh, I'm so glad you queued that up. I'm going to get around to that line. I'm so glad you queued that up. But anyway, this is what this whole dad thing has, that's kind of encapsulated it for me, is that, that more or less accidentally, but with some malice aforethought, we didn't raise no pussies.
Yeah. No, you did not. You certainly did not.
So anyway, for example, it's a tough place to be a foreign woman with no family. Mm. Yet both Simone and my younger daughter, Evangeline, they both ended up working there, all by themselves. And that's takes something. And they prevailed. They did it. So to be a single woman in Morocco, foreign and all that jazz, I mean, you have to have plenty that clanks when you walk.
Yeah.
And this is where your sister Ryan comes in, because she's one of these.
Yep.
Plenty of clanks when she walks.
Yeah.
And these are beautiful. Let me make it clear. These are beautiful, successful, hysterically funny, articulate, accomplished women.
Yes.
Proud of all of them. And they are a gas to party with. Not a single shrinking violet in the bunch.
No.
And they have grit. They're resilient. They prevail. It simply wouldn't occur to them to be any other way. That's the way they grew up. So I guess that's what I think. It occurred to me as I was thinking about this, that's what our subject matter probably is. How did that happen, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, coming back around to Simone and Ryan in Nigeria.
Yeah.
That story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in 2004, a pal of mine, John Sheehan, announced that he was returning from a decade working in Nigeria. Now let me explain about John. He and I were housemates after college. He went on to being a stunt driver with the Bailey's Hell Drivers.
Yeah.
He managed dinner theaters in the South. He managed beauty pageants in the Midwest. He sang professionally in the Light Opera of Manhattan. Then, in his 30s, he announced he was going to become a Jesuit.
Yeah.
You know about Jesuits, right?
Not really.
They're sort of the shock troops of the Vatican.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been that way for centuries. And in fact, if you're a Jesuit, it's still technically illegal to enter Spain. They can't take a joke about what happened back in the day. Anyway, and it takes 14 years to become a Jesuit. It takes forever. So I said, John, you're going to become a Jesuit. This is your greatest scam ever, right? You're going to get 3 hots and a flop for free for 13 years. Then you're going to run off with a nun, right? But no, I mean, he stuck in there. He got ordained, and beautiful women, pals from college, showed up to cheer him on. He was one of Simone's godfathers. And then they shipped him off to Nigeria. Now, let me tell you about Nigeria. Biggest country in Africa, potentially one of the richest, but no tourists ever go there because it's hardcore. Now, Lonely Planet, which is a pretty adventurous guidebook, right?
Yeah.
Even it says never take a taxi from the airport because you might get kidnapped or killed. Ooh. It's hardcore. Oh. And John was one of 3 Jesuits sent there to convert this vast country.
Yeah.
Now, to put that in historical context, centuries ago, in China, they sent 5 Jesuits. Into Japan, they sent 1. So Nigeria kind of split the difference. Right?
Yeah.
So, and when he went, I told him, "Oh man, this is going to be really expensive to get you out of this one." Anyway.
Well, you just send $2,000 down, and then they'll send you $25 million back.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about having to buy a Soviet helicopter. That was going to be pricey. Anyway.
Those Twin 50s you were talking about.
Yeah, the Twin 50s, yeah. So anyway, after about a decade, John announced he was returning back to the States. And I said, not before I get there, you're not. Yeah. And it turns out I would be his first visitor in all those years.
Wow.
His very first. So I announced my plans to the family, and Simone said, not without me, you're not.
Yep. Yep.
Right? And so anyway, and then she recruited Ryan.
Yeah.
Fine. So me and these 2 beautiful American blondes, 18-year-olds, show up at Lagos International. Just to put you in the context here, a month later when we returned, the guards greeted the girls.
Yeah.
They were memorable. They were unusual.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't see a lot of.
They're unusual here.
Yeah, but they really didn't. The guards remembered them a month later.
Yeah.
So anyway, our first morning there in Lagos, riding in John's battle wagon, by the side of the road, Simone saw her first dead human body.
Wow.
Yeah. Made an impression on her. Well, it turns out, okay, we told John said, well, what do you want to see? And we said, we want to see John's world. Yeah. Well, he delivered big time. He introduced the girls and me to his 8, quote, tribes, end quote. Okay. Now, one was a real tribe where he was a double chief. Long story how that happened. But anyway,
I don't know if any plant medicine was involved.
yeah,
or
no,
anything.
he's just he's a silver tongued devil.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was way hundreds of miles out in the boonies, but there were these other tribes that he had us embedded in were tribes like the Lebanese expatriates that ran the economy, the Brits and the Americans who worked for Shell in the oil patch, the Russians who ran the arts communities, and like that. And this was a big eye opener, especially to the girls who were 18, right?
Yeah.
So when we arrived at the village of the real tribe, I mean, out in the bush, I think they were Yoruba, but don't hold me to that. Anyway, people met us as we were rolling in, and we were clapping and cheering and running alongside the cars as we rolled in.
Really?
Because John that's what a double chief is, apparently.
Yeah.
Who knew, right?
Wow.
Anyway, and so they'd arranged this big feast that night, singers and dancers, and they pulled Simone and Ryan out to join them. Don't know what to do about this. Well, little did these Yoruba know what they were getting themselves into.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
At the time, you may recall, Simone and Ryan were co-captains of the Highland dance team.
Yep, I remember.
They were semi-pro,
Yeah.
right? So the drums started, and the girls hesitantly got up. Then they kind of gave each other this look that said, go for it.
Yep.
Well, in their wildest dreams in those parts, no one had ever imagined white girls dancing like that. And they ended up dancing all night.
Well, let me tell you, a guest Jesse Itzler had a hit rap single called "Shake It Like a White Girl." So any of those listeners, YouTube it.
Yeah, right, exactly. You talk about the change over the years. Didn't like to always used to be that way with white chicks in America.
No, it did not.
Anyway. Meanwhile, so this was an endless learning experience for Simone and Ryan. Meanwhile, and John is rotating us through these different quote-unquote tribes, right? And so back in Lagos, John embedded us with a tribe of rich Lebanese. Mm-hmm. And these Lebanese had an exercise group. And Simone and Ryan decided that this exercise group was lame. So they took over.
Yep.
And they taught these rich Lebanese women how to hip-hop.
Yeah.
Right? The Lebanese insisted they come to this big formal semi-annual ball. And Simone and Ryan said, well, they hadn't brought any clothes for that. And so the Lebanese woman lent them these gowns. Months later, Simone saw the dress she wore in an issue of People.
No.
It turns out it was French couture.
Yeah.
She didn't know. She's 18. What did she know?
Yeah.
What did I know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so before we left, the Shell folk, the tribe that drilled for oil, they ended up making the girls repeated job offers. Yeah. Stay. We'll pay you. Whatever you want. Mm-hmm. The girls are 18, right?
Yeah.
Well,
not even out of high school, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, let's see.
Ish.
Yeah, they were just out of high school. They were they were in college, but just barely.
Yeah.
And anyway, this was all a big eye-opener for Simone, as you can imagine. She kind of thought when she went to college that she'd end up spending 4 years there and then getting out and working at some lame nonprofit making coffee for the bosses, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, but no. Suddenly, these whole new vistas opened up to her, right? I mean, there was this vast world out there of which she had no idea. And she could see how she could fit into it. Mm-hmm. It was a big deal. Then, for Ryan's birthday, again out in the boonies, John arranged for a feast. Boa constrictor. So every May 20th, to this day, I always wish Ryan a happy Snake Day. Anyway, but most important, and this comes around to the line that you mentioned, queued up.
Yeah.
After dinner, for some reason, one of the girls mentioned that old line about she who dies with the most toys wins.
Yep.
Well, John and I went batshit. And No. We said, no. So we spent the evening convincing them, she who dies with the best stories wins.
Yeah.
And that's why Nigeria was the best decision I ever made as a dad.
Yeah. How on earth does somebody, you end up with qualities or characteristics and experiences that no one else, such a small group of people have had. That makes you extraordinarily unique. And to key in on one of the words that you used, resilient. That's one of my favorite words to talk about here. Yeah. And it's stuff like that makes people resilient, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you what do you have any recommendations to people to say, like, how this world particularly, I feel like I feel like challenge and overcoming challenge is what leads to resilience to some extent do you have any, do you want to chip in there on what resilience is or what it means?
I'm not sure I have any particular wisdom about being a dad. Yeah. I'm not just saying that. I really don't know that I have any advice worth a damn, but I do have stories.
Yeah. Well, the fact is, you've got two wonderful girls that are kind to people, that are very intellectual, that enjoy spending time with their parents. So
they still like me.
Yeah.
That's the great victory.
Yes. And I think if every parent grew to have adult children that enjoyed being with them, they would consider their parenthood a victory.
Well, let me tell some stories.
Yeah.
Okay. So
please.
So, which I hope addresses this. So anyway, one point, I'd written these books, and so people would say, "You want to give a speech?" So yeah, fine. So anyway, I had a speech at Disney World, and I brought Evangeline, my younger daughter, along, and she was still pretty little at that time. And so they comped us a VIP breakfast at Disney World, and featuring all these Disney characters, including Pocahontas.
Ooh.
Well, as I said, Evie was still pretty little. She freaked out, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
And you know what that taught me? That Evie is allergic to princesses.
That is so different than my daughter.
Yeah. But you were talking about resilience. Well, even then, I guess, Evie had a thing or two about grit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say some of that. So anyway, flash forward. So Evangeline, junior semester abroad, Greece. Mm-hmm. And we thank God for Skype, or else we would have spent a fortune on transatlantic calls. Yeah. Anyway, we connected, and she announced she was going to spend spring break couch surfing.
Wow. Yeah.
In Egypt.
Whoa.
Right after the Arab Spring exploded.
Yeah.
Well, she went. She did just fine. She met a lot of great people. But just in terms of lessons, just don't think that being a dad can't be a heart stopper.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to Egypt during the revolution, right after the revolution, and you're going to be couch surfing.
Yeah.
So anyway, what do you learn from that? Well, I remember one time after some monumental fight that I had with Simone, she said defiantly, "What do you want from me?" And I said, "I want you to be happy." So yeah, all we were trying to do was raise happy humans.
Yeah,
that's all we were trying to do. And I don't know if there's a handbook for that, but I don't know. I didn't read it.
That's why we're having this conversation, trying to figure it out.
Yeah. But the rest is just the way it worked out. Mm-hmm. And if you aim at that, if you aim at producing happy human adults, then you might get as a side benefit the fact that you end up with daughters who prevail.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, side effects to this. Earlier this year, my wife Adrienne and Simone and Evangeline and two of their childhood friends all ended up in Chicago, where Evie is working.
Chicago is for pussies, by the way.
I won't tell Evie that. And I certainly won't tell the Chicagoans that.
It's no Marseille.
Yeah, right. It's pretty hardcore. Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, part of all that was meeting for the first time Evangeline's new boyfriend, Gabriel.
Oh.
Well, I really felt for that poor son of a bitch. Never met him before and didn't know a thing about him. But I mean, this was his first exposure to the extended family. I mean, and this crew of women this is all grit, right?
Yeah.
This is all prevailed. And I thought, poor bastard. but it went great. Everybody got along fine. And one thing Gabriel learned, though, I'm sure, was that Evie was not a runoff. No. She's not a one-off. She never surrounded herself with pussies. Mm-hmm. They were all like this. Yeah. And so somebody once, I'll never forget, I mean, there was some study once that said that people learn more from the kids they associate with in school than from their parents.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
And, just seeing how these, and so, of course, this is a real big argument for making sure that your kids are surrounded by a superior class of weirdos.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And whether it's, they say if your hands aren't on your kids, somebody else's are.
Right.
So you got to make sure that
yeah, so it matters. I mean, the things you can control, like where they go to school and stuff like that. It's about. Yeah. It's not. The school is important. Yeah, sure. But no, it's about them picking the right circumstance in which the ocean in which they're going to swim.
Yeah.
Just picking the right ocean. Anyway, there was one time. I think it was Evangeline who once asked me whether I ever regretted not having a son. And that question, that had never occurred to me before in my life anyway. But
yeah,
when Simone came along, the first child, I had a wise old pal named Bill Grider who told me, you already know what it's like growing up to be a boy. Mm-hmm. Now you're going to learn what it's like growing up as a girl. And it's a whole new adventure. And wow, was he right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so finally, I tried to answer Evie's question, and I said, I think I'm reasonably in touch with my inner chauvinist. But honestly, that thought has never crossed my mind. I was talking to Simone. I mean, this has been a great adventure having these two girls. And I was talking to Simone before this interview, and she said, I said, what am I going to say? And she said, quote, I think, at least for me, it was always assumed that I had the intelligence to hold my own, travel, contribute to the program. It wasn't a hope from you guys. It was an assumption as clear as the sky was blue, end quote.
Wow. So she felt your confidence immediately.
It was the ocean in which she swam.
You think?
Apparently.
Yeah. Is that?
I take her word for it.
Yeah. The context now is different. Do you think that a parent, or you think it's a hypothetical, but if you were raising kids now in this environment, would you think you'd feel comfortable letting them have experiences or encouraging experiences like Marseille or couch surfing in Egypt? The world feels different than it did when we were 18, 20, 25.
I just don't know any other way to do it.
Me neither.
Yeah. Would it be? I mean, would it be smart? Well, you could debate that, but I just don't know any other way to do it. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's just about And as I say, I mean, it's not like we really thought about it. It was this embedded assumption that they were smart, or they wouldn't be here. I mean, and that they would do the right thing. And it was, we made it, I mean, especially Adrienne, their mother, she did, I mean, I don't know why you're interviewing me. She's the one who knows more about child raising than I do by several orders of magnitude, Mm-hmm. But but it's just the embedded assumption. I mean, and I guess it's part of the life you live and the experience you convey. And I mean, both of these girls have got. I thought I had the worst case of wanderlust in the history of the 20th century. Back in the 70s when I was working at the Post, and I had this deep burning thing about seeing America. Yeah. And that's and I ended up with a job on the national desk as what was officially called the chief of domestic correspondence.
Wow.
But what everybody at the Post called it at the time was, quote, the out-of-town job.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how Washington is that, right? Everything from Fauquier County to the Pacific.
Yeah.
Out of town. It just tells you how insular and isolated Washington was. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it became my mission to bring the great out there into this backwater of Washington and say, not only is the future out there, but it's coming to get you. And so I was the mouth of the funnel for a couple of hundred reporters. Some of them were bureau chiefs and some were roving correspondents. But a lot of them were stringers, which meant people who worked for newspapers in the great out there who would freelance to us and call us with stories and stuff like that. Anyway, and so...
you were their POC for that, their point of contact.
Yeah, I was the mouth of the funnel for all that. And every day we had to produce a report on the great out there. And so on the one hand, this was great. On the other hand, I was just dying because I wanted to be out there and not on the wrong end of the telephone, not under the headset.
Right.
So, and we had this problem in that, so our major competition was the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And they just had us totally outgunned. They had more money and more staff and more everything than we did. So we realized that the only way this was going to be a really miserable 3-year hitch unless we figured out some advantage. So we figured out we had to outthink them. And thus was born the 9 Nations of North America, which finally turned into my first book. And what this is about, this was about guys, my reporters, drawing lines on cocktail napkins.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was saying.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're saying, look, it doesn't work the way you were taught in grammar school by Sister Mary Holy Water. It's not 50 states and 3 countries. It really and truly, this acts as if this was completely different places that paid no attention to state boundaries or national boundaries for that matter. And yet they're there. You can see them, you can taste them, you can hear them on the radio. They exist. It's real. And the people who ignore this are going to lose power and money and influence. And so anyway, we ended up, early on, we ended up doing our first big hit on this, which was a series called Mex America. And it said, look, there's this place from Los Angeles to Houston and from San Luis Potosí, Mexico to Denver. And it's unlike any other part of the country. It's the place where that is becoming the center of power, money, and influence in the continent. And it's the place that is already, that has been for centuries, part of the coming Hispanic wave.
And when did you write this?
1978.
Okay. All right. And you feel like those borders are pretty similar?
It's amazing how it's really surprising to, we kind of did this. We did this on cocktail napkins. This was pretty theory free at the time. We were just reporting.
Yeah.
And so it's been so. A few years ago, the New York Times asked me to do a 30-year update on the 9 Nations of North America.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so I ended up doing this thing, and I said, my biggest surprise is how little the borders have moved. Mm-hmm. They moved some, but not much. And decades later, after the conclusion I draw is that culture and values changes really slowly.
Yeah.
Much more slowly than technology, much more slowly than politics.
Sure.
Who we are, how we got that way, where we're headed, and what makes us tick, that's pretty basic. Yeah. And it doesn't change real fast. And That's a good thing and a bad thing. You know, if you don't like the way it is, it's going to take a lot to change it. But on the other hand, it offers a stability that people, I think, crave in their lives these days. And that's why sometimes their allegiance can be more to a place like Dixie or Ecotopia in the Pacific Northwest. I had all these fanciful names for these places. Or New England. Or the Breadbasket. At the beginning of Nine Nations, I have a quote that said, from somebody who said, home in the 20th century is not so much where your heart is, it's where you understand the sons of bitches.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And boy, that's true.
Has the internet affected those borders?
Not as much as I would have thought. There seems to be these underlying realities that transcend things like chat rooms.
Yeah. I would have thought the 9 nations would have become 50,000 nations because we can put people and behaviors in these even smaller buckets.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, one of the things I learned, way back in the 70s was when I was first doing this. I mean, the way this got started is I ended up, we had been talking about this for a while.